Welcome back to season 2 of She Shield. This is an episode I am particularly excited about because I've wanted Vicky on my podcast for years. Vicky DiSanto is a functional health coach where she's so much more to me. She's been part of my health and wellness journey for 3 years now. And something I love to preach on all my platforms is that there is defensive self and then there's self-defense, guys. When it comes to protecting ourselves and our families, we have to be able to sprint a certain distance, have enough power behind our muscles in order to be, powerful against an attacker, all those things. It starts with taking care of ourselves. So, Vicky, I'm so glad you're here today. Thank you for coming on. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. Like Sofia said, I am Vicky. I am a functional health coach, which is really, I guess the way I describe it is like holistic health. I think that's a little bit more of a general term that people understand. We look at the body as a whole of its systems, not just one system at a time. I go a little bit deeper than just, nutrition and exercise. It's about hormonal health. It's about mental health. It's about gut health. It's all encompassing as to what makes you an optimally healthy human.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for explaining what functional health is. I love looking at the body as a whole. When I was going into medicine originally, family medicine, holistic health was something that I felt very passionate about. And then I realized, holy crap, I really like guns and I really like fighting. So might as well shunt over here. So I've been very glad to have you in my life because you are someone that is continually learning more and more about what health is. You do continued education. You are so great. Anytime I ask you questions to be like, oh, let's dive into that. Like you're not scared of the complexities of health. So you're the perfect person for this podcast because I'd love to speak to the listeners who have almost no idea what it is to start taking care of themselves. And if someone's listening who's maybe already on a health journey, hopefully this continues to inspire you forward. So I said something in the beginning of the podcast, which was that there is self-defense and defense of self. And that was brought on by a few guest speakers I had back in the day. They own a fitness and Muay Thai club called Fit to Fight. Ryan and Amber Hoover. And I like that concept because it really puts the responsibility on the individual who's wanting to become more self-defense oriented to also look at being a healthier person. So let's start with the question of what do you do when someone comes to you and says they just want to get started on their health journey? What's the first few questions you would throw their way that the listener right now could ask themselves to reflect as we move on with this episode?
That's such a good question to start off with, because I think especially in today's world, everything is really overwhelming. People get really paralyzed by the amount of information that we have at our fingertips. So just starting with the basics is really, really important. And I think a lot of people end up accidentally looking over the basics to the complicated stuff or the nuanced stuff. So being able to ground yourself in the foundations is step 1, but it's also step 100. Those foundations never go away. So the first thing that I always ask clients is, what are you eating and how much? So just being able to help somebody determine, are you under eating? Are you overeating? What does the diet actually look like? Like, what is it made up of? Not just macronutrients, if you've ever heard that. So how much protein, fat, carbs, and fiber you're eating, but what the micronutrient status is. The average American is not eating enough fruits and vegetables. A lot of women that I work with in particular are chronically under eating. So they might be fatigued or anxious or can't build muscle. So there's a lot that goes into just the foundation of diet. So I always do a food recall with my clients at first. I take a look at what they're eating and how much.
Absolutely. And for those that don't really understand what that process looks like, how do you ask them to track that for you?
Good question. Yeah. So I either have them do, like, I have some clients that are much more analog. So I will have them write down their food in a day and just approximate, it doesn't need to be anything crazy, but I also do use macro tracking tools with some of my clients. So like a MyFitnessPal or My Macros Plus, there's so many different platforms out there to just be able to start having a general understanding of what your day of eating looks like. I can't tell you how many times I start working with somebody that they're like, but I eat healthy, and they have no idea if they're getting enough protein. They have no idea if they're eating only 1,000 calories a day. This general blanket term of healthy is just too broad.
Absolutely. Also, definitely just called me out because I love to come to you with these crazy fitness goals. Vicky has had to deal with my bullshit for years. I've come to her and been like, okay, now I'm doing CrossFit. And you're like, cool, we were doing like Pilates last week, but okay, let's pivot.
Yeah, right.
And then
right.
the next week, I'm like, so I'm actually going to do the tactical games. So it needs to be CrossFit and it needs to be like a ton of running. And also I'm going to do a half marathon. She's like, okay, cool.
The half marathon of it all. Yeah.
That was so funny. What an awesome little arc there. I think mental health wise though, it saved me.
Absolutely.
Funny enough, never really thought I would do long distance running, but I think it's what I needed for my mental health. So I'm excited to come back to that with you because you mentioned that as part of the whole systemic view of an individual. But yeah, and Vicky always brings me back to like, okay, Sofia, that's a lot of movement. So what are we eating? And then she basically begs me to track, week by week. And then every now and then I'll actually do it. And then we have a great conversation.
And I'm proud.
Thank you. It always reorients me. And something I love to say and just remind people is that while I have my master's in exercise science, which I hate to even say because the majority of my learning has come from reading on my own, things I'm actually interested in. That's where we have like the majority of retention, asking Vicky a shitload of questions, being a personal trainer myself at one point. All of that taught me so much more about health than just getting my master's. A lot of it was like kinesiology and like calculating, the like physics behind movement. So, but with all that said, I can have this background, but I'm still always going to want to have someone that's more knowledgeable with me than me, someone who is keeping up with the literature like Vicky is. And I hope that inspires you as a listener to, if you've been kind of resistant to getting help, even if that just starts with listening to this podcast episode, I hope this encourages you to seek out a little bit more guidance because there are people like Vicky who devote their time to understanding the person as a whole, so that you can have some objective guidance to your kind of goals. So with that said, Vicky, we've talked a little bit about nutrition and we can come back to all these topics at any point. There is no rush here. I think it's really cool that that's the first thing you ask. You didn't say like, how do you want to look or what weight do you want to be at? It's just like, what are we eating day to day? Let's talk about that. You mentioned metabolic health. So for those listening who have no idea what that term is, what would you define metabolic health or a metabolically healthy individual as?
Oh, those are two different questions.
Ooh.
So metabolic health encapsulates. So when somebody thinks of metabolism, they think of this like thing, like an organ that's in our body. That is our metabolism. And we hear so much about, oh, I have a slow metabolism, or I can't lose weight because my metabolism is broken. Our metabolism is so many things. Our metabolism is essentially how well we utilize energy in our body. That's the long and short of it. And that is influenced and determined by so many different systems. And those systems are dependent on each other, working well together to be able to have optimal metabolic function. I think about thyroid health. I think about sex hormone production. I think about mental health, adrenal health, gut health, and even our muscle mass to body fat ratio. Some metabolic, like direct metabolic health determinations are like our insulin sensitivity. So insulin is a hormone that affects how well we store energy and how well we burn energy. So all of those systems are going on underneath the surface to be able to influence our metabolism. And when I think about somebody who is metabolically healthy, ideally what the picture that comes to my mind is somebody who moves their body regularly. It does not have to be anything intense. They walk, they are active, they have the energy to be able to be interested in getting up and doing things. The one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or the amount of calories we burn moving but not intentionally exercising, is actually higher than intentional exercise. So metabolically, that is more advantageous for somebody to do. So somebody who is metabolically healthy, they have the energy to move, they are active in some way. They have a good amount of lean tissue or muscle mass on their body as well. So this would be somebody who would engage in weight training, resistance training, or something that is going to help them build and sustain muscle. That person also has pretty optimal, or at least good, metabolic health markers, like they are insulin sensitive. The average American is either insulin resistant or creeping into insulin resistance. I think something like 60 to 70% of the population is struggling with either borderline insulin resistance or full-blown insulin resistance that can develop into type 2 diabetes. So good metabolic health markers like insulin sensitivity, they've got good gut health, they've got good hormonal health, all of the things, and thyroid, all of the things that determine and influence our metabolism. That's a lot.
Damn. Wow. Listen, as a podcast host, there are times that I ask questions. I'm like, thank God I went there, because I want to just unpack this more. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. So many great things you just said. I'm going to have to listen back to this episode a few times myself. So how do you determine the metabolic health of each client that comes your way typically?
So there are lab tests that we do. So typically when a client comes to me, especially a client that's like, hey, I'm not feeling my best. And I would argue that the average woman from the ages of 25 to 65 in America could feel better. And a lot of us,
absolutely,
I know you can relate to that, but a lot of us are struggling in some way and have either normalized it or have gone to the doctor and been told that, oh, you're just getting older, or, oh, you're just on your period, or whatever. I mean, we do get, we get our symptoms downplayed a lot, in modern society. Or we've just come to accept it because our lifestyles are so stressful and overwhelming, and we're really not built to be able to handle all of the responsibilities and all of the stimulus that we have. So I do lab testing. We test things like our thyroid hormone, we test our sex hormones, we test our insulin sensitivity and our lipid health markers, inflammation markers, all of these things that, again, influence our metabolism and our metabolic health, and all of these things that can in some way be measured. But it's not just about the data. It's about lifestyle. It's about where this person is when we first meet them. Because I can tell somebody what their labs say and tell them, oh, take this supplement or do this thing. But if this person has never exercised a day in their life, they spend all day looking at a screen, they don't have a good social circle, they don't have a good relationship to food, me being able to determine their metabolic health has a lot more to do with their habits and their lifestyle than it does with just the numbers on their labs.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Again, just so glad you're on this podcast right now. Oh my gosh, I feel so thankful. So yes, I love that. I've gone into a few catch-ups with you where I've been like, man, I just don't know why I feel like this. Like, I've been working out. I've been like eating well. It's fine, but the other night I did stay up really late because, I've come to you before and been like, when I've been in an unhealthy relationship even, and been like, so-and-so and I were up all night talking, and you're like, well, yeah, Sophia, like, of course you're not feeling your best. Like, if I hadn't told you that and been honest about kind of where my mental health, my support system was at, I wouldn't have been oriented towards this idea that, it was beyond my exercise and beyond my, caloric intake for that day. And I've had some other things that I've discovered working with you, like the Hashimoto's. I had no idea I was dealing with that. And I was feeling really fatigued, and it was during a very stressful time in my life. So we were able to take that and put it into context with everything together. And I've been really thankful for that, because there's nothing like being gaslit by a medical provider to say, you are just, it's in your head, it's just anxiety, when really it's something metabolic, or even by ourselves. Like, we're so good at just being like, if I hadn't just had that extra piece of bread, when really it's that you've been sleep deprived for the last 2 weeks. Like, it's really great to sit down with someone who's willing to look at you as a whole, and they have to take the time in order to do that. That's the problem with our like Western medicine culture.
100%.
Absolutely. Nowadays, in order for physicians to get paid, they have to bill insurance. And to bill insurance, you have to either, in order to make money with insurance, you have to either do a procedure, prescribe a certain medication, or do something that, again, is billable. Spending time with a patient is not as billable as it is to have them sign up for a gastric bypass, for example. Sometimes those are absolutely necessary, not speaking illy on that. But when it comes to what makes physicians and hospitals money, it's not sitting down and looking at the patient as a whole. And it's taking those extra 15 minutes to understand that that patient is losing sleep because of something really traumatic that just happened in their life. It's not just that they need to go on some, crazy sleep medication. It's that maybe they need to get some psychological help and some systems in place in order to sleep better. Things like that. That is so beneficial when it comes to working with a coach. So I love that you're going in these directions. I'm so excited to explore this more. So from what I understand, and of course my experience with you, you not only ask all the questions and get a full assessment, but you sometimes recommend blood work. And would you call that a metabolic panel, technically, what you ask them to do, your clients?
We call it a comprehensive panel.
Okay.
So
Beautiful.
a comprehensive hormone panel, because that's not to be confused with a comprehensive metabolic panel, which is a CMP, which is something that if you went to the doctor and said, I want to get labs drawn, they will draw you a CMP, comprehensive metabolic panel, which will have some of the markers that we just talked about, but not all of them. For example, they might draw your glucose and your A1C, two really important metabolic health markers, glucose being the amount of sugar in your bloodstream, typically fasted, and then A1C being the 3-month average of your fasted blood sugar. But they won't draw insulin, which is how much insulin is being produced in order to move that blood glucose into tissue. So those are 3 markers that go together to help us be able to determine how metabolically healthy somebody is, or at least some of the factors. And those aren't always taken into consideration together with the labs that your doctor will pull. So I do hear that a lot. Somebody's like, oh, I went to my doctor because I wasn't feeling well, and they drew my labs and they said everything was normal. Well, what did they really look at? A lot of times they're not looking at a full thyroid panel. A lot of times they don't even mess with looking at women's sex hormones. They won't look at inflammation markers. They won't look at stress markers like cortisol, reverse T3. So a lot of things end up getting missed. And that's when we get dismissed. That's when we get gaslit. So it ends up kind of becoming the mission or the responsibility of the patient, of the person, to be able to look a little bit deeper. And not to toot my own horn, but I feel like that's where I fill in the gaps. We need the medical system. We need all of the systems that we have in place to be able to help us in certain regards. But if you're just feeling off or less than your healthiest, or you feel good, but you want to continue to be healthy for the next 50, 60, 70 years of your life, that becomes a mission that you have to go on kind of either solo or with the accountability of somebody like a health coach, because they're going to look at things from a different angle. I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of unfair, the position that doctors have been put in. They can only spend 10 to 15 minutes with each patient. They don't get to know us personally. I really pride myself on having a personal relationship with my clients so that I can understand, like you said, what's going on, not only with how much you're eating and how much you're exercising. That matters, but not that much. What's going on in your life? What are the factors that are influencing the way that you feel? I think women in particular are really, really good at pushing themselves if they have a goal or if they've been told that something will benefit them. And it's like, this is the thing that I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on my diet. I'm going to focus on my nutrition. But then everything else goes out the window. They forget that we also need to take rest days. They forget that we also need to prioritize sleep. They forget that we need recovery. So it ends up becoming somewhat of a flawed system where we end up accidentally pushing ourselves too far without the balance, so to speak, of all of the multiple things that we need in order to take good care of ourselves and take good care of our health.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Yeah, and I'd like to add that it's not like these physicians are malicious people. These are people also on a very foundational level trying to provide for their families, but also they are not set up for success if we're defining success here as understanding the patient as a whole and looking deeper rather than just kind of prescribing medication on top of medication. The systems they come from are the medical schools, right? And those schools are not prioritizing that. I can tell you that for sure. While I only did a semester in med school, I can say that I was very underwhelmed with the amount of support for the med students. Like our mental health and our physical health was not said to be a priority. We were told to put those things on the sidelines while we just memorized information slide after slide. Not only that, but I thought I was going to a medical school that was going to give me a little bit more curriculum than, say, an allopathic school. So I went to an osteopathic medical school as opposed to an allopathic. They are known to be more holistic, and I saw none of that. This episode of She Shield is brought to you by Right to Bear. You've probably heard me say that self-defense is more than simply carrying a firearm. It's awareness, avoidance, and preparation for anything that is to come your way. And that's why I'm partnering with Right to Bear. They stand by defenders like you and me. You'll receive benefits like expert witness support, psychological care, gun replacement, and even protection for other lawful self-defense tools like pepper spray, knives, and even your hands and feet if you have to use them in a struggle. What sets Right to Bear apart is that they are dedicated to education and immediate legal response. In case you do ever have to protect yourself, you have access to a 24/7 attorney-answered emergency hotline so that you are never alone. What I love most, though, has to be the personal connection that Right to Bear will have with you as a member. For example, Frank, the president of Right to Bear, will give you a personal phone call when he hears about a claim being filed. That level of care in the industry is extremely rare. If you carry, train, and believe in thinking ahead to protect yourself and your family, consider getting a membership with Right to Bear. If you use my code FIT4FIA10, you will get 10% off your membership, and the link to access this and to learn more is located in the show notes of this episode, which are the notes below the title. Protecting yourself and your family should not leave you defenseless afterwards. Stay safe and stay vigilant with Right to Bear. So let's go into how you address, first of all, mental health with your clients, what you look for, and why it is such a big part of the overall health and wellness journey. That was a lot of questions in one, but just take it wherever you'd like to from there.
I'll break it down. I'm ready. This is a big one. So first and foremost, it's going to sound pretty cheesy and very general, but mental health really is everything. It helps determine our motivation to get up off the couch and move our bodies. It influences the way that we view ourselves, our self-worth, our ability to feel like the things that we do are going to be worth it, or that we even are capable of doing the things that are sometimes hard in our health and fitness journey. And so much of what you and I have been talking about with our metabolic health markers and, all the facets of metabolism influence our mental health and vice versa. For example, the fact that there is a constant feedback loop between our digestive system, our gut, and the microbiome in our gut and our brain that influence our mental health, and that our mental health influences our gut health. So it's so intrinsically connected in so many different ways. So if your mental health is poor, you're probably not going to have a lot of growth mindset. You're probably not going to have a very positive view of self. And that's going to be really hard for you to feel like you're worthy of investing in yourself, your time, your energy, your resources, whatever it is. So although I'm not a therapist, I am not certified to diagnose anybody with any sort of mental health issues, but it ends up being kind of an underlying theme in a lot of the work that we do. It's something that it gets talked about a lot too. Mental health, another really broad term that we hear about all the time, and things that we need to do to improve it, or, different medications that are out there, or different doctors that we need to see, or therapists that we need, or whatever. And ultimately it goes back to the foundations. What are you doing or not doing in your life day to day to take care of yourself well enough to have good mental health? And again, it often gets really overlooked, or there's less importance around that, as there are things like exercise and calorie burning and all of that. But if we don't have good mental health in terms of the way that we view ourselves, in terms of the way that we are self-motivated, nothing that we talk about here, or the things that we want to get done, will ever get done. So it really is everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've really valued our many conversations over the years where I've gone into a meeting with you thinking like we were just going to talk about the kind of like the weight I lifted over the past week, or the amount of days I got to the gym, how I adhered to our schedule. And I've kind of started opening up with what's gone on in my life, and you've been able to help me navigate what I can do for the following weeks with my regimen that you've set up for me, given my circumstances, whatever's going on. One of those was I went through a pretty traumatic time when I had a divorce about a year and a half or so ago. And it feels crazy that it is that long ago, but I was really thankful just to have you there to remind me to eat food and like go for a walk. Like you weren't like, no, Sofia, you got to hit the gym 5 days a week. Like I had days where I didn't feel like I could really even get out of bed, and having someone to help you manage your like life occurrences with your goals is always really lovely. So I've been very thankful for that. And you're right. The sexiest part of fitness and what we see the most on social media, even though we've had an increase in awareness when it comes to mental health, is physical fitness. I know that my For You page, as much as I've tried to keep it kind of separate from my gym page, I get a ton of videos of people lifting in the gym and just, looking really awesome. Yes. And I think there's a big component, you mentioned this earlier, of us kind of overcomplicating in a way that side of things, when there's so much more to be said about the mental side, the nutrition side, the metabolic side. So I'd like to go ahead and pivot into fitness, it's so weird to use that word because that's everything, but specifically into physical training. And what does it look like first when you take on a new client and you look into what you might want to start with them when it comes to moving their body, resistance training, endurance, all of that? What's that first step you take typically?
Before we venture into that, can I just give a little nugget when it comes to mental health? Because I don't think I answered a couple of the other parts of your question. It was a multifaceted question.
It really was. And I think it's because it's hard to, exactly. It's hard to know like where to start with it all. It's so vast. So yes, please do give the nugget or the whole chicken.
It can be overwhelming. Yeah, let's do it. So I think it's really easy to just talk about, mental health is super important. But if there is somebody out there that's listening that struggles with their mental health, they're like, great, thanks for telling me the obvious. I know that it's important. What do I do to improve it? So I want to make sure that there is at least some valuable takeaway.
Absolutely.
And so when it comes to mental health and functional health or functional health coaching, here are some things that I try to prioritize and pass on to my clients. So first and foremost, when we break down mental health into mindset, or our ability to see ourselves well, or our ability to see ourselves doing a hard thing, we have to start from square one. So if you feel like you are stuck and you feel like you can't achieve the thing that you want to achieve, even though you want to, and you might try and failed a bunch and that makes you feel like you're confirming your bias that you can't do it or that you're not strong enough or whatever it might be, starting with one thing, one small promise that you can make for yourself will be able to help open up the door to trust yourself. Ultimately, growth mindset is our ability to trust ourselves, that we say we're going to do something and we actually follow through on it. So making one small promise to yourself and following through on it, making sure that that promise is so manageable, especially if you're in a state where you really don't have any self-trust or your self-trust is very low, to be able to just say, I'm going to do XYZ, whether it be drink water when I first wake up in the morning, or I'm going to put myself to bed at a reasonable hour, or I'm going to walk for 5 minutes. That makes such a huge difference in your ability to see that you can do the things. And it's not about being perfect. If you set a goal and say, I'm going to do it every day, and then one day you don't do it, you didn't fail. We just start back over the next day and we don't judge what we didn't do. It's all about what we are able to move forward with and how we can build momentum along the way. So that's a nugget for mental health as it pertains to your ability to change your mindset about yourself. Because again, all of this is important, but if we don't ever start, this conversation is pretty much pointless because we need momentum and trust in self to be able to get going. Now, if you feel like you do all the things and you're still really struggling with your mental health, there are more deeply layered things to be able to look at. First and foremost, after we talk about mindset, we have to establish certain ability to, hold on, let me think about that for a second. I like to establish with clients what their daily habits look like as far as being able to, I'm trying to word this correctly. Sorry, Brendan. What your daily habits are around your circadian rhythm health. This is a really big one that often gets very overlooked. We spend a lot of time looking at screens. We spend a lot of time indoors, and people don't realize the power of getting natural sunlight on their face. So if you're like, ooh, I just struggle to get out of bed in the morning, or I'm really dragging, or my mental health is just low, like I feel much more, I feel more inclined to be depressed than I do happy. Try to prioritize getting outside, prioritize more direct sunlight in your face, preferably in the morning, but anytime during the day is better than nothing. And set some damn boundaries around screen time. It's hard because these things are designed to keep us on them, but we have to, again, going back to our mindset, we have to make promises to ourselves and then keep them. So less screen time, particularly at night, more natural sunlight in your face, particularly during the day. And then finally, we are now finding that mental health is very, very closely tied to our gut microbiome and our gut health. So taking it one step further beyond that, it's really worth exploring your gut health. I can't tell you how many times somebody comes to me with gut issues that I then find struggles with anxiety, depression, are on SSRIs or, whatever it might be, and then vice versa, right? We later uncover that this person hasn't had a regular bowel movement since they were 10. So they're so deeply and directly influential of one another that if you are struggling with mental health, you might want to take a deeper look at what's going on with your gut health. Start with the foundations, eat a nice fibrous diet, get rid of some of the junk, stop drinking so much alcohol, stop drinking so much caffeine on an empty stomach, and put good, nutritious food into your body and see if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, and if you are one of the many women out there that struggle with bloating, IBS-like symptoms, and you also have mental health issues, it's definitely worth at that point looking a little bit deeper below the surface. I do gut health testing with some of my clients that have some decently severe or chronic symptoms. So that can be an answer in and of itself of why you're struggling with mental health issues is you've got a terrible gut microbiome.
Absolutely. Sorry, I muted myself. I live near an Air Force base and I was like, this is too good to be interrupted by these jets here. No, but
Thank you.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I love that so much. You've really changed my mentality around uh, my relationship with food. I grew up with a father who's a cardiologist, and I think he had good intentions when it comes to setting us up to be good kind of consumers, especially with, oh my gosh, especially with all the options we have nowadays. It's just way too convenient and easy to eat unhealthily. It's becoming more convenient to eat healthily, which is really exciting. But I think some of the impact he had on myself and my sisters was shame. We had a lot of shame around eating either too much food or the wrong type of food. And that conversation alone with Vicky has been a recurring one. I think I'm finally in a place in my life where I'm in a routine of eating foods that I find absolutely delicious and healthy at the same time. But it took me a long time to figure that out. And I've experienced everything from restriction to a period of binging. Do you remember that? I totally forgot about that. But I went through a little bit of a binge period.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And same. I mean, that's actually what got me into wanting to health coach in the first place. Was I had it was undiagnosed, but I definitely had a binge eating disorder in my early 20s that ended up progressing into like binging and purging. And I was like, I remember going to purge my food one day and I'm like, this is a rock bottom and I should probably figure this out. And that, the shame I felt around food, similar to you, and then the loneliness that I felt around my food consumption. I remember feeling like I was the only person on the planet that struggled with food. Everybody else had it all figured out. Everybody else, it was easy for them to just say no or whatever it was. And I just felt so alone. And then when I learned that other people struggled with that and I could help them if I just learned and, put myself out there and got certifications and gained experience and whatever, that just drove me straight to where I am now, because the relationship to food piece is so hard. We all have baggage around food in some capacity. So it's just so powerful to be able to like free yourself of that. And it does start with just being able to trust that your body needs nourishment. And I just think so many of us, men and women, are taught to believe that less is more in that regard. And just being able to recognize like our bodies are really complex. They need food to be able to do all of the things that they need to get done in a day. And we talk about, I was just going into hormone health. Our body has to make hormones, and then our body has to utilize those hormones. And then our body has to get rid of the hormones that are no longer being used. So there's just so many systems going on that we don't think about day to day, because thank goodness they're not conscious things that we have to worry about, but they require energy. And I so appreciate your willingness to trust that food is actually good for us and it's necessary, and that finding that happy medium somewhere between nutrient dense foods, because we want to take care of our body, and also a little bit of fun here and there. When it comes to being able to have that structure, we really free ourselves of the baggage from food.
Absolutely. I didn't even expect to go here today. I think in my brain, I was like, we need to hit metabolic health, and we need to hit food, and we need to hit sleep, and we need to hit fitness, we need to hit like self-defense. And I had all these like boxes to check. And this is the part about podcasting that I absolutely love. Like the part where you are led somewhere you didn't expect, and then you get to leave later being like, oh, this is refreshing to like go back and talk about. But first of all, thank you so much for being vulnerable on the podcast and sharing your journey. I think it was one of the things when you shared that with me when I was going through it, was very helpful, because it is such an isolating thing to struggle with food. You do think everyone else is okay, especially when you're in a public setting and you're eating with your buddies, and everyone's just able to like enjoy what they're eating. And then you're in your head, you're like shaming yourself. You're thinking about maybe, in my experience, at least, what I need to do exercise wise to work this off, or why didn't I order that healthier thing? Just so many things going through my head that I don't even like enjoy the meal at that point, or I didn't enjoy the meal at that point before I started thinking about a couple things, and split into two pillars. One is genetic predisposition. I just tried to combine those two words. what is in my what is in my genetic code that has affected my body's ability to metabolize food? Like, what can I look at that my parents struggled with that maybe has been passed down to me? And then the other side of that is the nurture part. What relationship do I have with food based on the way my mom used to talk about food in a restrictive manner? Like, I just ate too much, and she's over here eating a freaking small piece of salmon and some broccoli, and she ate too much shit. That means I ate too much. I ate potatoes too. Like, that must mean I ate too much. You know, parents don't realize how they're kind of priming their children to see food in a certain way because they didn't take the time to sit down and think about their two pillars of what leads to ultimately our relationship with food and how we just associate it with life, you know, if it's life-giving or life-taking away. And of course, our bodies are always going to be part of cultural propaganda. Like, it's sad. Like, if you look at how much health and fitness is part of the beauty industry and the clothing industry, and how much they use shaming and they use that to ultimately for marketing purposes, right? Like, our bodies are a trend. I love right now, like, the skinny trend is coming back, especially with some of the GLP-1 medication out there. And that is not to say they're all bad. I think that something I really love about Vicky is I was very curious about that. And she was able to explain to me that it's not just the taking of GLP-1, it's everything you do in addition to it. It's the concentration of it. It's like the why behind it. But there is a little bit right now of this kind of like skinny trend going around. Like, it's like in to be really skinny now. And we have to reorient ourselves constantly, especially because we are scrolling so much, of like, what is our individual goal? Is it to be strong? If it is, like, what does that look like? And how can we stay oriented in a culture that uses shaming and guilt to kind of control us and gets us to buy certain products to avoid that feeling of shame and guilt? I just went into a whole rabbit hole. Yes. I feel like just so many little things I brought up, but it's all so part of, like,
and it's all in
what shapes our mindset.
Yes. To bring it all the way back to mindset. But no, I mean, it's, when talking about people that are interested in self-defense and defense of self, we have to make sure that our goals align with our, the execution of the goal too. We have to make sure that, you know, if you want to be able to defend yourself, if you want to be healthy enough to be able to run away from an assailant or hold a firearm or whatever, we have to take into consideration how we execute on that. And being undernourished, being exhausted because we are overtraining, we're not prioritizing self-care like sleep, circadian rhythm health, we're not feeding our body healthy, complex carbohydrates and healthy fats and protein and all of that, then we're going to fall short of the goal. So we have to make sure that we are, as hard as it is to not be influenced, the best advice I can give around that is to stay in your lane and trust that the healthiest version of yourself is not going to be the smallest. There's nothing wrong with being skinny. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be lean. There's nothing wrong with any of those goals. It's just at what cost are you willing to get to that goal? And if it gets in the way of you wanting to be able to defend yourself, if it gets in the way of you wanting to be strong, if it gets in the way of even you wanting to be able to have a flexible enough lifestyle around food to be able to afford a burger and a beer every once in a while, then you have sacrificed too much of what you want. So to kind of bring it all the way back, it's like, if we're talking about being able to, defend yourself, we need to be fed. We need to be recovered. We need to have the amount of energy that it requires to be able to do these things.
Absolutely. I really love that. That's been probably of all, there's been so many inspiring components of working with you, but that one has been the most, it's taken me the longest to wrap my head around it. Like, oh, I actually have to eat to do all of this working out to gain all this muscle and power and strength that I want to gain. And that's not to
Yeah.
say my goals haven't changed all the time. Like they change all the time. I think I give you whiplash probably with them, but I do love how you recently you recently said in our last get together that I've always prioritized kind of more of like functional strength and at least have a foundation of like, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
I do want to be functionally strong, which means that my activities of daily living, this is how I interpret that. Please tell me if I'm wrong with this definition, but like performing activities of daily living and being able to defend myself and fight, that all comes from like functional strength as opposed to like more hypertrophy based lifting for a bodybuilding purpose, which is kind of how I started in the fitness
Yeah.
world. Like I just wanted to look not fat, to be honest. I just wanted to look good in my clothes. And that is not to say that that can't be a goal. That's also part of my goal now. But that was like my only goal. And I found very
Yeah.
little fulfillment from going to the gym because of that. When I think about all of the reasons I go, first of all, it's mental health. I've recently had very little consistency with training, and it is absolutely just proportional to my mental health. When I do not train, I am not as happy as an individual. I don't show up as well as a partner, as a friend, as a daughter. And I very much see that, and I have to take an assessment and realize I'm not just going to the gym to train. Um, it's also to like keep myself in my best place, to show up as my best, to reach the goals and other aspects of my life when it comes to career or just enjoying my day to day. So yes, I'm so glad we took this time to talk about that. And that doesn't mean we have to go off of the topic. I do and would love to know how you initially assess how your clients should get started with physical fitness. Like say a client comes to you and they maybe have a kind of a interesting background when it comes to, they work out every now and then, but they're
Mhm.
looking to gain some consistency. How do you assess what's best for them when it comes to uh, intentional exercise?
Oh, I was a personal trainer for many years before I moved to being fully online and then getting into functional health. So the the exercise part of it is a big piece. I really want the client to feel connected to whatever it is that they are doing. Like you said, it's really important for you to recognize that it's not just about going to the gym to get fit. There has to be a reason deeper. And it's important when we're first starting out to make sure that we have a good why. We understand why functionally deep down, this is important to us. And in speaking to your audience, if the goal is self-defense and defense of self, then making sure that we are training to be able to do that, to be able to trust that we're going to be able to take care of ourselves is really important. So knowing somebody's why going into it is a big priority. Then being able to take a client from where they are, this applies to everything that you and I have just talked about, from hormonal health and our ability to overcome hormone dysfunction, to mental health, to nutrition and relationship to food, to exercise. All of that, it's really important as a health coach to take a client from where they are to where they want to be in a sustainable and manageable way. So unrealistic expectations have to go straight out the window. If I'm working with somebody who's never exercised a day in their life, somebody who's incredibly sedentary, step one is just getting them to move. So go on a walk, go walk to the end of your neighborhood instead of, if your mailbox is at the end of the neighborhood, don't get in the car. Go get your mail by walking, just setting yourself up to move your body a little bit more. Get up and do something, anything. That doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you're going from sedentary into a little bit more. I always prioritize progressive overload resistance training in all of my clients. Some, of course, we do more than others. Some have more of an aesthetic goal. Some have more of a functional goal, right? Some people have a goal of just making sure that they don't break a hip when they're 80. So that looks a lot different than somebody who wants to grow, a big old booty and some huge delts. So
Yes.
the goal is important. The why is important.
Right.
But I always prioritize resistance training. I think every person on the planet would benefit from some version of resistance training because we need to be strong. We know that muscle is metabolically healthy. We burn more calories at rest when we have more muscle tissue on our body. We know that it makes us more insulin sensitive. So we talk about metabolic health in other ways. We are also going to be able to store more glucose in our muscle tissue, which prevents us from gaining more fat, storing our energy in fat tissue. That basically is what ends up happening when somebody becomes insulin resistant. There's no more room for that glucose to be stored in because we don't have enough muscle tissue. So there's those advantages. There's also the physical aspect of just being able to, move your body in functional ways, to be able to put something, to be able to reach for something or carry our groceries. All of those things are functional training. So resistance training is always at the core of what I do. But if somebody has never lifted weights before, we start with the basics. It's easy things that most people can accomplish: squats, push-ups, rows, bicep curls, all of these really basic foundational movements that don't feel overly awkward to the average individual. And then we progress. Progressive overload ultimately just means getting stronger over time. And that might look like being able to do more reps. That might look like being able to do more compound lifts. That might look like being able to lift heavier weight. The goal is just to be able to stimulate the muscle to be able to grow and maintain lean tissue. So that's the approach that I take. I'm definitely set in my ways, and that I know based on, anecdotal experience and the science that we have to back it up, that resistance training is at the top of the priorities list. But I also understand that, girlies love Pilates, you love jujitsu and Muay Thai, and we have to be able to fit the things that we love into that as well. So we don't need to be in the gym 5 days a week to be able to get the results that we want. If there's somebody who wants to cross train like you want to do high rocks, or you want to do tactical training, 2 times in the gym is plenty. An upper body day and a lower body day, or 2 full body days. Somebody that wants to really prioritize gaining muscle, 3 to 4 days in the gym is plenty. And by the way, you don't need to be there for 2 hours, 45 minutes in and out, and you're good.
I'm really glad you talked about what it looks like realistically, because I do think people have this understanding that when you jump into the gym, it's going to be, 3-hour commitment a day. You have to learn all these new movements. You have to spend a lifetime there. But something I love about what you do, just like you said, you assess the client as a whole. If someone is not going to the gym at all, you're not going to give them 5 days a week in the gym. You're going to help them scale up to something reasonable that they can do consistently. And I think that's something really great about you as an individual and coach. And then something I want to really bring up is this fear around physical training making women too bulky. I know this is kind of it's one of those things that it was trending for a while to talk about this online. Like, will working out, lifting weights make me too bulky? I'm going to stick to my Pilates. And I think it's so sad that there's a fear around that instead of this kind of motivation towards the overall wellness that it brings. I mean, there's age-related muscle loss, which is sarcopenia, that we are constantly having to fight. And instead, our culture has kind of made us afraid, again, going back to making our bodies kind of a trend of lifting heavy weights and getting stronger and putting some muscle mass on. So what would you say to someone who's listening, who's like, no, I do not want to get in the gym because I don't want to look bulky. I want to look feminine. I don't care about, being able to lift heavy weights. I'm too scared to look like that. What would you say to that person?
I would probably say, let's redefine what femininity really looks like and what femininity really is, because feminine and dainty and small do not have to be synonymous with one another. Femininity is so much more complex and so much more beautiful than being the smallest person in the room. So first off, that, because I personally really have been on a journey over the last several years of redefining what femininity means to me. And I think we've got it almost completely backwards in culture, because being feminine and being in your feminine energy is actually quite strong. So there's also that, but I also understand that everybody has their own aesthetic goals and aspirations. I can also say from anecdotal experience, I have been weightlifting for almost 15 years now. I'm trying to get bulky and I've yet to accomplish it. And I have been doing it for many, many years. I understand why I've worked with so many women over the years that tell me, no, 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 I'm different. As soon as I start lifting weights, I start to get bulky and I look really boxy and all of that. And ultimately what they're explaining is that their muscles are starting to fill with water when they exercise. That's a perfectly normal scientific phenomenon that happens, but it doesn't mean that you are going to continue to bulk up and gain more and more lean tissue. It's incredibly hard to gain lean tissue. But also you can control that by the amount of intensity and the amount of frequency with which you train. So if you're like, ooh, I need to avoid resistance training because I don't want to get bulky, then the answer is not avoiding it completely. The answer is managing how often you do it or how intensely you do it. In which case I would stay within 3 to 5 reps of failure. Don't ever train to failure and you will progress, but you won't build a ton of lean tissue. Also, don't resistance train 5 days a week. Train 2 days a week. It always finds its way back into the conversation. 10 years ago when I started on my fitness journey and, I used to do bodybuilding competitions and all of that, that was a huge topic of conversation of like, weightlifting won't make you bulky. And, the goal should be to get as strong and muscular as possible as a woman. And now the Pilates body is back in style or is in style. And the conversation around that has changed. So it will always be something that recirculates in pop culture, no matter what the body of the year is, as far as what's in fashion, the stance is still the same. Resistance training needs to be a part of your world.
Thanks so much for that take. I really hope that whoever is listening to this and maybe struggling with some of those same assumptions about physical fitness, they can listen to this and feel inspired to think about what their why is, what their personal goals are fitness wise, that not only support what they want to look like, but how they want to feel, how strong they want to be, what they want their body to be able to do. And that goes into, of course, the self-defense question. I get a lot of people too that say, well, I can't start jiu-jitsu because I need to get in shape first. Or I can't start Muay Thai because I need to get in shape first. When really those are also excellent ways to start your fitness journey, especially if the group class idea is something you like, or just kind of how it applies to self-defense. But you will find that resistance training is always something you want to have in addition to that if you can. And so if you're interested in that, the best thing you can do for yourself is to work with someone who is more knowledgeable than you are and is willing to hold you accountable. There's a lot of stress going into a new year as well to kind of have a new you. And if that is something you're interested in, definitely play on those new year vibes, that momentum, and don't be afraid to reach out and get some help for that. Because if I didn't have accountability, I'd be a lot more mentally unwell than I am. So we are unfortunately at time, but this is only a part 1. I want Vicky to come back on sometime. We've had a ton of internet connection issues today. I'm really excited to not have her have to deal with that next time. But Vicky, thank you so much for your time. Besides all of your information being linked in the show notes, where would you like people to primarily find you and get in contact with you?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on, even with some of the technical difficulties. I am on Instagram, mostly. Should probably have some better boundaries around that, but we're working on and you can find me, my handle is quite long, because I have to keep the tagline of the company that I work with. So it's Vicky D Fitness _ Scooby Health. So you can find me there, shoot me a DM. Get in my comments. Let's have a conversation. And I'm more than happy to help answer any questions that anybody has. Totally free. I love talking about this stuff, obviously.
Absolutely. That's lovely. Definitely check her out, you guys. You have so many great tips on your page as well. You've been great to just post free information in the form of reels. So if you all are listening and you're like, well, I want more of Vicky, definitely go and at least just hit that follow button and keep up with her and her progress. She also shares some client testimonials on there if you want to see what she's been able to do and help people transform with yeah, I need to be better about that as well, about sharing my journey there. I feel like I just fluctuate so much sometimes, and
no,
but
we should collab because you have some pretty incredible. You've had progress from the inside out,
Thank you.
Of
I
course.
appreciate that so much. Everything from my relationship with food to having a realistic expectation of myself when it comes to going to the gym,
Yeah.
to gosh, just like talking to you about like life changes I've wanted to make, like quitting
Yeah.
medical school. You were such a pivotal part in that. I think you were one of the first people I ever even opened up to about
Mhm.
that because I felt so much shame and
Yeah.
obligation towards it. But before we go, Vicky, I love to ask my guest speakers what they would like to leave the listeners with. So what would that be for you today?
I think it kind of encapsulates the theme that we were talking about, which is just to take action, even if it's messy, even if it's not exactly where you want to be yet. Just meet yourself where you are at today, set one goal for yourself to be able to learn how to trust yourself more and to be able to start the momentum. But even if it's messy, take action.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. This has been an awesome episode. Uh, again, thank you for fighting through the technical difficulties with me today. And yeah, guys, thanks for listening. If you can take a moment to hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, follow the podcast, that really helps us get out there, and rate it if you can. If you don't want to rate 5 stars, feel free not to rate. I'm just kidding. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, listeners. Stay safe and stay vigilant.